4 states, stretching nearly 2,000 miles. The line between the United States and Mexico both separates and unifies the communities and people living along the border. It's their home, their history. It's also the subject of national debate and political tug-of-war. In the next 30 minutes, we'll take you along the entire length of the border, from the Pacific to the Gulf of Mexico, with a team of journalists from BorderReport.com, revealing the border like you've never seen it before. You're about to come with us on a journey of discovery along the U.S.-Mexico border. We're taking you on a virtual tour using state-of-the-art technology, broadcasting and streaming to a national audience from this newsroom on wheels. In September, a team of journalists from Nexstar Broadcasting traveled the entire length of the border. We wanted to discover and report stories that enlighten and inform people across the United States about what's really happening along our country's southern border, and introducing you to a unique new website, BorderReport.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm reporter Anna Wiiernicki, traveling with a team from BorderReport.com. The mission of our website is to provide real-time delivery of untold local stories of people living, working, and migrating along the U.S.-Mexico border. Right now, we're in Laredo. You can see the Rio Grande and Mexico right behind me. We've been stopping along the way to discover what people don't see in the national headlines. You're about to find out what life is like for everyday people who live along this geographic and political line. Our 10-day journey started at the most western point of the border. We're at the western and southern edge of the U.S.-Mexico border. Right behind me, you can actually see where the border fence runs into the Pacific Ocean. But despite this physical barrier separating the two countries, here at Friendship Park, people from both sides of the border wall can actually come together and talk to each other and touch each other. And on Sundays, they come together for worship. The California coast comes to an abrupt stop where the border fence meets the Pacific Ocean.
When I go to Mexico and I'm on the other side of that wall, you could really see like the struggles of people like wishing and wanting to be here and like risk it all.
Stephanie PINEDA says on the U.S. side of the fence is an area called Friendship Park, and she says the mood is very different.
On this side, you see like all the security, and you're just basically here as I guess you could say as like a tourist.
I just show my ID to the border patrol and they let me go.
Sunday was Irving's first time to Friendship Park, but he's not a tourist. He came to see his family for the first time in 10 years. They live in Mexico and he lives in Northern California.
Hopefully to hug them or grab their hand or anything like that, but I was just putting my finger through the wall, try to touch and have like contact feeling.
Friendship Park is the only place in Southern California that actually allows people to legally walk up to the border fence. The park is open on the weekends from 10 to 2, and Border Patrol limits it to 10 people inside the area at a time, except for on Sundays.
They always insist that the agent on duty has discretion, so it depends on what's happening that day.
Reverend John FANESTIL runs the cross-border church service every Sunday in Friendship Park from the U.S.
We have a table on the Mexican side, and I set up a little altar on the U.S. side.
FANESTIL says for a few minutes every Sunday, people from both countries are able to forget about the barrier that separates them and unite in worship. Where we are right now is one of the busiest borderland crossings in the world. We're told that over 30,000 people walk through these streets every single day, and a lot of these people are border commuters. They're U.S. residents who commute from Tijuana to San Diego every morning for work. It's Monday morning madness on San Isidro Boulevard. Trolleys line up ready to take passengers into California. Many of them, like Brenda Cortez, are trying to get to work.
I do it every single day for the last year.
Cortez lives the trans-border lifestyle. She lives in Tijuana and works as a pharmacist in San Diego.
For me, it takes about 30 to 40 minutes, and that's from the point that I go out of my house, cross the border, and get to my job.
The cross-border commute is common. Jason Wells with the San Isidro Chamber of Commerce says a lot of U.S. residents choose to live in Mexico.
Because San Diego is so expensive to live in, Tijuana really has become a bedroom community for the workforce in San Diego.
Every day, over 100,000 people cross over from Mexico into San Isidro, and they're all tourists. They either cross by foot through this port of entry or by car, which could take up to 5 hours.
As soon as you walk either way, you see lines of thousands of cars just waiting to cross over. And, they start people from 2 in the morning, start making line.
But Wells says for most people, it's worth it because for them, it's as easy as crossing the street.
That's what going to Mexico is for us. We're a binational region. We get the best food south, the best clothing north. We get to enjoy the best of both worlds.
We put into our Google Maps where the construction for the wall started, but when we took a left off the main road, we hit a road closed sign. If you look closely right here, it says it closed on August 22nd for border infrastructure construction activities. For acres in the Oregon Pipe Cactus National Park, there's nothing but cacti. But as you drive closer to the Lukeville port of entry, the road signs turn into caution signs, warning visitors of smuggling and illegal immigration. And then, right before you can see the border, you can hear it. Construction for the border wall actually begins right behind me. Essentially, it's going to be an extension of what we're seeing right now, but we're only allowed to get this close to make room for the construction vehicles. But the construction doesn't bother the few locals who live in the area.
Most of the people is concerned about the wall of nature.
Hector Molina says he frequently crosses the Lukeville port of entry because it's easy. There's not a lot of people who live nearby.
It is the closest port of entry. This is the closest and the fastest on this Arizona border.
Molina says the wall doesn't really bother him, but it does bother the wildlife.
If you put a wall, animals won't be able to go across.
The fence here in Arizona looks a lot different from what we saw in California. This is only about 12 to 15 feet high compared to California, which was about 30 feet. But before this fence was built, it's a pedestrian fence. What you're seeing right behind me is a vehicle barrier, and we're seeing that all the way up and down the Arizona border. Reporting with me on our tour are Sandra Sanchez and Julian Resendez. These experienced journalists publish stories daily on BorderReport.com. Formerly with the Dallas Morning News, Julian is based in El Paso. And previously with USA Today, Sandra is our South Texas correspondent. Their stories, pictures, and videos from the tour quickly filled BorderReport.com, enough to create an entire tour section, which now lives on the navigation bar. Go there to see an interactive map showing the path of our tour, plotting each of the locations our reporters visited and linking to the stories gathered there. Also, send us your story ideas and feedback. Contact our team through the website under the About Us section. I'm standing in the outskirts of Nogales, Arizona, where local ranchers say they're being tasked with maintaining the international boundary with Mexico.
Literally on the other side of that bollard-style fence is Mexico.
Several miles up the mountains in Nogales, Arizona, Dan Bell says his ranch meets Mexico.
We've been neighbors with our fellow ranchers in Mexico for three generations.
But Bell says the only way he knows his property versus his neighbor's property in Mexico is this barbed wire fence. Where I'm standing right now is literally where the border fence changes from steel to barbed wire, and local ranchers say they're having to maintain it by themselves.
We've gone in together with them to rebuild sections of the fence, put brand new fence in that was over 70 years old.
Bell says the fence is there to keep his cattle from going into Mexico, but it doesn't stop people from trying to cross over into the U.S.
The border is south, and it runs clear across.
Bell's neighbor down the road, Robert Noon, says he sees people on his ranch all the time, but he considers himself lucky because there's a buffer between his ranch and the border.
The thing about my location is I'm close to the highway, so it's much easier access for the Border Patrol to patrol it.
Santa Cruz County Sheriff Tony Estrada says about 1,000 Border Patrol agents patrol the 50-mile stretch between Nogales and Mexico.
That is a lot of presence here along this border.
Estrada says Border Patrol focuses on the rural areas, like the acres of ranches right outside the city, because that's where he says more people try to illegally cross. The fences out here are a lot different from what we saw inside the city of Nogales, where they were a lot more rugged and not as easily approachable. As our tour of the border continues, we reach New Mexico. After the break, we'll take you back in time, more than a century ago, how history has become a moneymaker for one border town. And later, trying to swim their way to America, a border town where this is an everyday sight.
We did get to see some of the challenges, not only for the federal agents that patrol such a wide stretch of border. You can literally walk for days from the border, from the Rio Grande, and not find a town on the Texas side.
The canyons in California make it very difficult for law enforcement agents. I did it right along with Border Patrol. In Smuggler's Gulf, it takes 45 minutes to get from one side to the other.
Find the latest developments about border wall construction at borderreport.com. Welcome back. I'm Anna Warnicki with the team from BorderReport.com. We've taken you through California and Arizona, about 700 miles so far as we travel east along the U.S.-Mexico border. Now to the land of enchantment. We discover New Mexico is also a land rich with history. It's been more than 100 years since Pancho Villa invaded this small town of Columbus, New Mexico, one of the few times the U.S. has ever been invaded. But local businesses say the Battle of Columbus is actually what drives nearly all of the tourism here. Right off Highway 9 in New Mexico is the small border town of Columbus. And one of the first faces to greet you is Irma.
Come on, follow me.
Irma Gonzalez has lived in Columbus for 30 years. She's the owner, operator, and head chef at Irma's. She says most of her customers are tourists.
The tourists, they do talk about Pancho Villa.
Mexican revolutionary leader Pancho Villa invaded Columbus in 1916. 18 Americans were killed in the raid. But now, over 100 years later, Irma says people on both sides of the border consider him a hero.
Because he's the only one that crossed the United States.
And just down the street at the Los Milagros Hotel, pictures of Pancho Villa cover the wall.
No one knows for sure why he raided. There's about 5 or 6 theories out there.
Philip Skinner owns the hotel. He says once a year, Columbus celebrates the Battle of Columbus with their neighbors across the border.
Palomas has a party for them, a dinner, and then those riders cross the border the next day. They get special permission to cross, and they ride up here, and there's a switching of flags.
Columbus sits 3 miles from the border. You can't actually see the fence from in town where I am right now, and residents say they don't really talk about the wall much either.
We don't talk about Trump. We don't talk about immigration.
Skinner says his biggest concern is the border shutting down.
Well, that would put me out of business, so that gets me, the blood pressure up a little bit.
Residents say they have a really good relationship with their neighbors in Palomas. I spoke to someone who said the closest dentist is actually across the border, so he says that's where a lot of U.S. residents end up going for their regular checkups. Flying over the Bright Ranch in West Texas, it's hard to tell where Jim White's ranch ends and where Mexico begins.
It's more of a community that's split by the river, by the border.
That's because there's no wall, no fence, just sensors.
Come up some other way, it catches them too.
White's family has lived on the Texas border since 1885. The ranch is well known in Texas history for a raid that happened here in 1917 by Mexican revolutionaries. Since then, generations of people crossed through their land with few serious problems. But 2 years ago, Jim says he was forced to step up security.
My wife found several bundles of marijuana hidden in the brush, and we learned that they had dropped a pin, and the crew had come from Fort Stockton to pick up the dope.
So Jim put in a security gate out front, installed dozens of hidden cameras around his property, and added an electronic fence. This is the eyes and ears that senses any activity along the ranch's 12-mile stretch that backs up to Mexico. And if it does sense any activity, it will then send an alert back to the ranch.
We have not caught any dope in 16 months.
Jim says he knows within minutes if someone is on his property. He'll get an email, the local sheriff will get an email, and so does Border Patrol.
Everybody works together to coordinate it, and we call law enforcement and have them intercept them.
And White says he doesn't keep track of how many people he's caught on his hidden cameras. He just keeps a stack of pictures on his desk.
I'm just defending my little part of my little turf.
This trail right behind me is just one of the ways that smugglers would bring their drugs through the ranch. But since the technology was put into place, the smugglers have been forced to find other ways to get their drugs around the ranch and beyond. And soon we'll move beyond the New Mexico state line as our border tour arrives in Texas. Coming up, visit an American town where Spanish is the official language. Plus, as more border wall goes up, concerns about animals getting across.
There was a lot of things in common between the people of all those places. I found great empathy for the migrants on American communities, but I also found a sense of we feel your pain, we want to help you, but please follow the laws.
See live video from our network of border wall cameras at borderreport.com. The next stop on our tour is south of Laredo, Texas. 20 years ago, the border community of El Cenizo made national headlines by declaring it was changing the official language of the city to Spanish. On Sunday morning in El Cenizo, the streets are quiet, with the exception of a few cars who are just passing through. That's because most of the town is here. Pastor Juan Gonzalez speaks a little bit of English, but that's common in El Cenizo. The small border town south of Laredo adopted Spanish as its official language in 1999.
The community is growing and speaking English.
But now, 15 years later, the town is trying to shift back to English. Pastor Gonzalez says most of the congregation understands English, but he chooses to do the service in Spanish so everyone who comes to church can participate.
Hubo una confusión.
He says it's a misunderstanding that the town doesn't want to speak English. It's simply generational. Most of the community migrated from Mexico, but now as they get older, the kids are picking up English.
It's good that they talk both English and Spanish.
Martin Gallegos says he wants his twin boys to be bilingual.
It's better because for the jobs and everything, you know, that you have to talk in English.
Gallegos and his sons had the park to themselves. He says quiet is normal. Many of the residents have left.
They went back to Mexico.
Gallegos and Pastor Gonzalez say they see a lot of people come across the Rio Grande from Mexico.
Le damos de comer o agua, pero hasta ahí nada más.
Gonzalez says he usually just gives them water and they'll keep going. Only a few choose to stay. Gallegos says he does see a lot of Border Patrol in the area. He says they often come down the river by boat or he'll see them driving around. Our drive along the border ends at the Gulf of Mexico. Up next, building the border wall in South Texas. Why construction causes concerns for communities there.
A bunch of grannies drop water bottles in the desert in Arizona to help migrants in case they need it. And they're very, they follow the federal laws extremely carefully. They never put a migrant in their vehicle. If they see them, they call law enforcement. If someone's unconscious, they won't drop water jugs in federal property. That's illegal. But they just go out on their own, 2-3 hours in the desert with their little compasses. They know longitude and latitude because they feel it's faith-based. They feel compelled to try to help these people.
Send us your story ideas and feedback. Contact our team through the website under the About Us section. Since most of the Texas border is only separated by the Rio Grande, migrants choosing to cross can either swim, but most of them go by raft. This is common to see in Laredo, someone from Mexico trying to swim across the Rio Grande to the U.S.
Every day you can see them coming across.
Daniel Montez walks his dog through Los Dos Laredos Park every morning. He says he sees about 5 or 6 people swimming from Mexico to Laredo every day.
We're used to it, you know. It's always been this way, but I think it's gotten worse.
Where I am right now is on the edge of the Rio Grande, so you can see there's not a lot of distance between where I'm standing and the water. Laredo and its neighboring city in Mexico, Nuevo Laredo, are separated by about a 150-foot span of the Rio Grande. So close that Border Patrol agents can talk to people on the other side. That's what happened when we saw this swimmer make his way across the river. A Border Patrol agent immediately told him to turn around. Agents told us they see 60 to 70 people attempt to cross in the area every day.
They know that we got a lot of protection.
Nathaniel Barrientos says the people he sees trying to cross use a raft or inner tube. Here in Laredo, it's a very known port of entry, so we've seen a lot of Border Patrol presence in this area, but other places we've visited along the Rio Grande here in Texas, we haven't really seen many Border Patrol agents because those areas are so remote. Right on the other side of this wall right now, that's not Mexico. Mexico is actually 200 yards from here. But what we're seeing here in South Texas is that they're actually having to push the construction of the wall inland to preserve the wildlife refuge. When former Hidalgo Mayor John David Franz designed Hidalgo Pump House World Birding Center, he envisioned a peaceful nature reserve right on the Rio Grande.
A beautiful hike and bike trail for people.
But since 2009, an 18-foot steel-beamed wall runs right down the middle.
Ideally, you want a wall or a fence at your border.
The existing border wall in Hidalgo isn't on the border.
Initially, we were opposed to it as a community, but we realized that we didn't have the resources to fight it.
And the 18-foot fence in this part of Texas is about to be even taller. U.S. Customs and Border Protection announced plans to build 65 miles of border wall in South Texas. 11 miles will be here in Hidalgo. This is about 18 feet tall. The new design for the wall here in South Texas will be about 30 feet.
Yeah, I'm concerned.
Ken Ortner lives near where the new wall will be built. He says some homeowners are worried what will happen to their property.
Because some of these people, they kind of front on the river, and then you got this thing that's going to go through.
That's part of the challenge the government has in trying to build a wall. Personal property rights, the environment, and safety are all vying to be the priority. But Ortner says he's not sure a wall will stop people from crossing into the U.S. Less than 100 feet from where the current wall towers, a wooden ladder dumped in the brush. Construction for the new border wall here in South Texas is set to begin early next year, but it depends on if they get clearance to build on some of the land. In the past 30 minutes, we've brought you along our journey that took us 10 days and more than 2,000 miles on the road. We hope you enjoyed exploring with us along the southern edge of our country. But we want you to know our stories don't end here. Be sure to continue following us on our website, borderreport.com. I'm Anna Warnicki on behalf of reporters Julian Resendez and Sandra Sanchez and the rest of the team at borderreport.com. Thank you for joining us.